Okay, what we're going to have here today is I'm going to call it Sharpening for Dummies because I watch a lot of information on YouTube, people who are trying to show you how to sharpen knives. And the bottom line is, I don't think they bring it down to the common denominator, the lowest level. These are guys who have sharpened for years. They've got the feel of it. They know how to do it, and they're just like, oh, I don't know. For the bottom line, I think they're just talking over most people's heads. So this is Sharpening 101, and when it comes to Sharpening 101, we're going to start talking about burrs. Um, well, and I hate to say burrs because I think burr gives people the wrong impression. And here's what we're going to do. If you take a knife and you put it on a stone and you start sharpening it, okay? What happens is that edge that you're sharpening is going to start to lay over and point toward the direction that you're doing. Because you think about it, as you're sharpening, you're pushing that metal off to the side. And if I had a piece of paper here to try to graphically represent that, when you have that stone and you're sharpening it against that thing, basically on the end of that blade, what you've got is you've got a little tip of metal that just starts to push off to the offside of where you're sharpening. And of course, as you turn the blade over and you start sharpening the other way, the metal starts to push off that other way. And so this is a knife that, and like most people who know how to sharpen knives, your biggest problem is finding a knife that's dull. And this particular knife is dull. I mean, it's bad. And it's actually my son's hunting knife. It's a Buck USA, 4.5 inch, 5 inch blade on this thing. And I have a hard time finding knives that I've got that are just scary dull. And this is a scary dull knife. It's like he must have run it over a barbed wire. I don't know what he did to it, but it's not a very sharp knife, and it's a perfect knife to have to start one of these videos was talking about that layover. Okay, so as you sharpen a blade and you're running your stone on the blade, what's happening is that blade lays over this way, and then we turn over the blade and we do this way, and what happens is then it overcompensates and it lays over the other way. So if I was going to give you one hint or one tip to make a knife really, really sharp, I came a little prepared. If you can control over that layover, which people call burrs, and I don't understand, it's a really confusing term. When you sharpen that knife and that thing starts to lay over on the opposite side, I'm going to call it layover. Some people call it burrs. It's the same thing. But if you can control that layover, you're going to get a sharp knife. So what I'm going to do is just, for an example, I'll do a little sharpening. And what I've got is a really coarse diamond stone. It's 600 on one side, 400 on the other. That's the 400 side. I'm going to grab a little bit of oil because I don't care what anybody says. Actually, a lot of oil is a good way to sharpen a blade. So I've got an ample amount of oil on this thing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sharpen this blade. My whole key here is I want to control that layover. I don't want the blade to go too far this way or too far that way. I basically want it to come to where it's a chisel point, and that's going to give me my sharpest surface. So this is a 400 grit stone, and what I'm going to do is, and you can do it a lot of different ways. You can start here and pull toward the tip, and you can hear this thing as it's going through. This is a really coarse stone. I mean, this is almost people, there's probably people grimacing at this point because this is a really sharp stone. But I've got a really dull knife and I want to work on it fast. Start coarse, work finer. If you started on this thing with an 800 grit stone, this is going to take you a considerably longer time to do. Now, when it comes to pulling, pushing, figure eights, all the different things you can do on a stone, the bottom line is it really doesn't matter. I mean, I've pushed knives from the tip forward, and that's a great system. I've taken them and I pulled them back. That's a harder system to learn, but it works. I tend to like to, there's a lot of times for different things, but the bottom line is that what we want to do and this is critical, and the thing that I see on videos so much that really kind of pisses me off, if I was going to say it, is there's guys who go, oh, well, do 5 strokes on this side and then turn it over and do 5 strokes on that side and 5 strokes on this side, or whatever the case is. If you really want to control that edge, remember, if you can control the way over, you're going to get a sharp knife, is you want to put an equal amount of strokes on each side. And if you stroke 5 times on one side, it's going to lay over a long ways. And then as you stroke 5 times towards the other side, it's going to lay back over this way. My feeling is you stroke once, and you stroke once, and you stroke once, and you stroke once, and it really helps to control that layover, and it'll make a big difference. Now, when I'm controlling the angle of the blade, I usually try to go with what the factory is installed. And if that's a 30-degree angle or a 23-degree angle, that works really good. A lot of times you can look down on it. But what I like to do is I like to take my finger and I'll set it down and I'll get the angle set. And I'll just use that finger as a guide. And of course you have to kind of pick up on it to control the angle all the way across. When I come back the other way, I'll use my thumb, but I'll remember that, I kind of get a memory for where that thumb's at. And here again on my finger, that's about the right angle on my thumb. And controlling this angle can be a little tricky. There's systems that allow you to do that, like a Lansky system that'll do that for you. But like I say, with this 400 grit stone, I'm just basically, this is really rough cut stuff. This is you could use this on a lawnmower blade. I mean, this is a really tough stone, really coarse. Okay, now, as we go along, we're going to go to rule number 2. So if you're going to control the way over and you're going to get it sharp, rule number 2 is, and this is really critical, your grit of your stone times your pressure is going to equal your finish. Okay, so let me explain. This is a 400 grit stone. There's a lot of guys out there that are going to give me bad feedback because I'm using a 400 grit stone on such a nice knife. But the point is that if I take this stone and I go, like this, and just put as much pressure as I can on it, I'm probably going to ruin this blade, okay? But on a 400 grit stone with a very light amount of pressure, it's going to get my desired effect. Because if I push really hard down on this thing, it's going to really bite in the steel and it's not going to do any good for it. But with a light amount of pressure on a 400 grit stone, you can actually put a really decent finish on a blade. Okay, so this was a blade that I just tried a second ago, and all I've been doing is just going 1 or 2 strokes on each side, 1 or 2 strokes, and when I get down to the end, I might say, okay, I'm just going to really lightly. I mean, I'm just hardly pressing it all down on this thing. And this is a 400 grit stone. And just to finish that off now, I don't know, I may not be here because this is really, really coarse stone. Okay, but this blade is getting a little bit sharper than it was before, and I'll feel it there. There's a lot of people I know that this particular blade would be sharper than anything they've ever had. Okay, it really is sharp enough not to shave any hair off of anything, but it's getting close. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll take that off and we'll just turn this thing over, and we can go to the 600 grit. Put a little bit of oil on it. Well, put a lot of oil. I'm not a guy who believes in a little bit of oil. I've seen guys who are just like dip, dip, dip. Don't make me mad. The oil is meant to pull those metal shavings away from the blade, so you want to use it a lot. Okay, immediately when we start on here, you can tell that this has a much finer grade, much finer grit than the last stone because it's really getting better. I mean, you can just tell right away it's not like coming across the deal there. And bottom line is when you go to this 600, it's not going to take very much work and not very much pressure. If you really wanted to, you could bear down on this thing, but that's not the point. The point is remember, grit times pressure equals finish. And you don't want to, if you're trying to get a fairly nice finish on this thing, you don't want to be really bearing down on this thing right now because bottom line is that the harder you push down, the coarser your finish is going to be. And you know, the bottom line is on a 600 grit stone, you can get a finish, if you're a newbie, that you haven't had before on your knives. Now see, I'm just working one side, working the other, because remember, you want to control the rollover. If you go 3 strokes on this side, 3 strokes on that side, you're going to be pushing that blade over. That little tip's going to go flaring off this way on the 3 this way, flaring off this way on the 3 that way. And you don't want that blade tip getting that far out of control. You just want to have 1 stroke here, 1 stroke here, control that rollover. And unfortunately, when you're working these coarser stones, you really can't feel if one side's laying over farther than another. But as you go along and as you get on the finer and finer stones, you're going to be able to kind of feel that deal. Okay, so another piece of paper here. Let's see how we're doing. Yeah, yeah, we're getting there a little bit, but keep in mind I'm only on a 600 grade stone, so it's kind of still iffy at best. But I went from dragging it on the paper to where you can actually start to get just a little bit of a feel on that. And so in my next video, and trust me, if you were feeling this is a really sharp blade. After just a 400 grit and a 600 grit stone, this thing is really going along. Now I'm going to produce a video that's going to be the next in line on this, where we're going to take this thing to the next level and go off of a 600 grit and take it on to the Arkansas stones, and really within, seriously, how long I've been working on this, I have to check, maybe 5 minutes. I've taken a knife that I could run my finger on this before, and if I did this now, it would cut me. So, and I'm just using the manufacturer's angle on this. I haven't bothered re-angling it or anything, because the bottom line is, it's on a buck knife. The angle you got is going to be the angle that you want to keep. So let's kind of recap what we're doing. If you can control your layover, which is just, seriously, if you take 1 stroke on one side and 1 stroke on the other, and don't do anything like you see on other videos where they're taking 3, 4, 5 strokes on one side, turn it over 3, 4, 5, your layover is going to be way too great. This makes it really easy, and on any blade that isn't, that's reasonably dull, that doesn't have a whole bunch of problems, this system with 1 on one side and 1 on the other is going to give you the fastest, quickest knife. Seriously, you'll make your friends impressed in 3 or 4 minutes on what most people would consider to be, a coarsest of stones. I mean, you can buy this stone from me on eBay for $10 with shipping, with the 4 and the 6, and it'll probably make your knife sharper than you've done if you're a dummy. The other thing to remember is your grit times your pressure equals your finish. So if you have a 400 grade stone, you don't have to be, bearing down on that thing and just really going to town, because it's 400 grit and it's coarse enough, it's going to do its trick. Keep a light touch. When you go to the 600, when you first start out, you might be pushing down hard, but you can take a 600 and you can finish a knife literally almost to the point where you can cut paper. Now, there are limitations to a 600 stone, and when we get to the say an Arkansas hardwood, which is considered an 800 stone, you can take that finish and make it cut paper. So but this is the type of finish where if you're like, oh geez, my knife doesn't do anything at all, and I really don't know how to finish, if you go one side, go the other, control that layover, and don't push too hard. Let the stone do the work. Use oil to pull those extract all those minerals off of there, and you're going to get a reasonably sharp blade with what most people would consider to be a stone they wouldn't even own.